And to give you a brief history of our gallery, it's been in existence. This is our 180th year. It's been owned by 3 families in that 180 years. An Englishman, William Pell, opened the gallery in 1842 at 79 King Street West. And he owned the gallery for almost 30 years, at which time, 1870, the Roberts family bought the gallery. And they owned it for almost 80 years through a couple of different generations and moved around the city to a few different locations. My grandfather, Sidney Wildridge, acquired the gallery from the Roberts family in 1948 and reopened the gallery at 759 Yonge Street, which is just north of Bloor. My father joined into the business only a couple of years after that. So, and by the mid-50s, my father had changed the gallery from being British and European paintings and framing to really a Canadian artists only gallery. And we moved down to 641 Yonge Street in 1961 when they were kicked out of the 759 Yonge because of the formation of the subway. We were there for 60 odd years, and as I say, handling only Canadian artists. At which time we've moved to our new location at 631 DuPont. We opened here a year and a half ago, right in the middle of COVID, and it's been an interesting experience to say the least. But we love the gallery, love the space. It's the 6th location in the gallery's history. And at this point in time, we handle roughly 30 Canadian living and producing artists from across the country, and a lot of historical work, Group of 7 and other contemporaries of the Group of 7, some of whose career we handled while they were living.
When did you join the gallery?
Good question. I joined the gallery. I went to the University of Western Ontario, graduated in '78, and went out and tried my hand at accounting, which I did not like. So my father said to me, well, you've worked here during the summers, and said, why don't you come work at the gallery until you figure out what you want to do? And that was 44 years ago, so I'm still trying to figure that out. But no, it's great fun. My wife Charlene has been a very big part of the gallery for the 37 years we've been married, and now our 2 children, Allie and Tom, are in the gallery with us as well.
It's a dynasty.
Something like that, yes. So they're 4th generation, which is kind of fun, and they're starting to put their eye to use in the gallery. And really, I remember working with my dad. It takes 10 or 12 years to get to know the artists, get to know the collectors, the other dealers, the auction houses, and everything. So there's a lot of different moving parts to the gallery, and they're at that position now where they're starting to feel very comfortable and are known within the community. So it's fun. It's fun working with them, and the nice thing is when Charlene and I go away on holiday, I think it's probably the best thing for them because they've got to run the show and they don't have us to ask questions. So we're looking forward to taking more vacations in the future. Anyways, it's great fun.
Well, it's fantastic. We're looking forward to the new collections coming out and the new artists that will come and join your gallery. Thank you so very much.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Hello Tracey, it's wonderful to meet you today at Roberts Gallery. It's your opening for your new exhibition, which is called
Escarpment Encounters.
Escarpment Encounters. And where does the title come from?
Well, my studio is located in the beautiful Niagara Escarpment, which is a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve. And it is a beautiful landscape of rolling hills, patchwork of heritage farms and forests, and I delight in being able to live and work there, and it's the inspiration for all of my artwork.
Must have been a lifesaver during the confinement.
Yes.
You could escape to it.
Well, I was there full time, and it didn't feel like an escape. I could look out my windows and see this beautiful landscape, and there was still all the natural environment around me, and the bees and butterflies doing their thing. And so I didn't. I feel very fortunate that I was able to be there during that time.
Yeah. Now you call yourself a textile artist, and you create still life and landscapes in thread.
That's correct.
So that landscape that you live in and that you draw inspiration from, is that what it's going to be?
That is the source of what I do, yes. I think it's to be celebrated. We take it, in Canada we have so much beauty around us, we take it for granted, and I think it definitely needs to be celebrated.
So the thread is really a continuation of your drawing practice.
Yes, as a child I loved to draw. I mean, I've been both embroidering, doing hand embroidery, traditional hand embroidery, and drawing since I was very young. And I used to do these very, very fine pencil sketches, either just pencil or colored pencil. And what I do now is actually an extension of that. I'm just using thread rather than the colored pencils.
And when did the switch happen? What made you switch from pencil to needle?
Well, it wasn't actually a switch, it was kind of combining the two. And it was also experimenting with different machinery. I mean, I started quilting at one point, and I did a lot of traditional quilting and applique and those types of needlework techniques. But along the way, I bought a long arm sewing machine, which is a large industrial high-speed sewing machine that only stitches up and down. But the nice thing about it is that it's on wheels, and so you can move the machine head, and it actually allowed me to draw with thread. And so that has enabled me to experiment and develop the technique that I use now.
How big is your the table on which you work?
It's 14 feet long. If I wanted to, I could quilt an extra large king-size quilt on it, and I have done that, but I'm not doing functional items now. So I don't need a table that big for the pieces that I'm doing here, but it still gives me that mobility and the ability to move the machine the way I like.
So, I mean, you say that you use the thread to draw. It's more than that. Explain a little bit the technique to us before we go into looking at your pieces, because really they need to be looked at from close by so we can get a sense of the incredible precision that it requires. This is a huge machine to create small work. We can start seeing some at the back. So give us a sense, a little bit of the challenge.
Well, as I say, it is a high-speed machine, and controlling it in very small areas for the detail is a bit of a challenge, but that comes with practice. But basically what I'm doing, I have a subject that I'm interested in. I do a base drawing, which is really outlining the large shapes. It's very much like a painter does on a canvas, with a pencil outline of the basic elements of a landscape, for example. And then I use that as a pattern to cut colored pieces of fabric, and that becomes my base for stitching. And it allows me to make sure that my composition is the way that I want it, and things are going to be in the places that I want them, rather than my subject stuck up in the corner or something like that. And then I start stitching, and it's layering multiple layers of thread in many, many different colors, because I never, even though I've got hundreds of colors of thread, I never have the exact color that I want. So I'm blending and mixing them and layering them and completely covering the fabric. So once you see the finished work, you have no idea that there's fabric underneath. That's just kind of holding the stitches together.
Right. I mean, I have to say I've seen it, and it is extraordinary. I can't wait to show it. But that precision, and it's really like all these subtle colors and nuances and shades that you create stitch by stitch. I mean, thread by thread, and it's
yes.
It's kilometers and kilometers of thread, isn't it?
Indeed. Yes, my thread cones have 6,000 meters on each one, so I go through a lot of thread.
I'm sure. So, do you buy from a special supplier, or?
It's a local Canadian company called Canso, and they make thread for the the clothing industry and supply a lot of the Canadian industry. But they have such a great range of colors that that was what took me to them in the first place.
And is the thread made in Canada or
Yes.
just? Yeah, it is. Oh, that's amazing. But where's the mill? I mean, is it just?
They're in Montreal. They have two places, Montreal and Toronto.
Okay, incredible. Okay, so let's have a look now at this exhibition about escarpment. And it's not just about the flowers, it's about also the animals, the insects that
Yes.
live in it.
Yes.
So you do two kind of work. One is flat work, I will call it, and another one is 3D work, which is like sculpting with threads, really.
Yes.
Which is quite extraordinary when you think of it. Shall we start with maybe the roses and the bee here?
And the bumblebee. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the bumblebees, the bees, and the butterflies are our native pollinators, and I'm fascinated with them. And they're so small, and they're so often we take them for granted, and we don't realize that what an important part they play in our ecosystem. And for all those, every time you eat a tomato, think of a bumblebee, because without a bumblebee, we would go. The technique that I'm using is based on a very, very old form of embroidery called stump work. That evolved in the Elizabethan era. And at that time, what they were doing is they were starting to make these small allegorical scenes where they'd have a little person with a skirt that was dimensional and came out from the background, and they'd be sitting under a tree where the tree trunk was crocheted and a branch was coming out with a little pear hanging out in front. So they evolved from, flat surface embroidery. And so I've taken those old techniques and adapted them using my long arm, believe it or not, to stitch those little leaves and petals and things like that. So to make this, Rugosa Rose has 5 petals. I stitch each petal individually, and then I bring them together to form the rose, and all the anthers and stigma I've sewn through a process called needle weaving. So that's all a single thread woven back and forth and back and forth. The bumblebee is an embroidery technique called turkey tufting. So it's like making a carpet, and you have all these loops, and then you snip them so that you end up with a fuzzy thing that looks like a bumblebee. And the wings are silk organza that have been stitched with silk thread, and they're mounted on copper wire, and that gives them their shape and their ability to stay there. All of the sepals are mounted on copper wire, and it's a single thread woven back and forth. It's called needle weaving, and the wire gives them the stiffness so that they can stand out.
So I just want to mention again that, for example, these petals in white, it is all 100% colored by the thread.
That's correct.
There's no fabric that we can see here. It's the same for the leaves and everything else. So everything we see is thread. There's
That's
absolutely no color. There's not a millimeter of fabric that we can see. It's absolutely extraordinary. Can we talk about this triptych here? What is the story behind that?
This is wild blackberry in June, July, and August. My husband and I were doing a walk through a local nature conservancy, and I happened to spot some delicate white flowers in the underbrush, and I wondered what they were. And when I went up to look at them, I could see the green centers, looked like a berry of some sort, but I wasn't sure. So that was June, went back in July and spotted these unripe berries, but I still didn't know, so I had to go back in August to find out that they were actually wild blackberry. So the blossoms in June, I have stitched it with silk ribbon, and then there's all the hand embroidery for the centers. The background and the leaves are machine stitched and then appliqued on. Then the unripe berries are all done in embroidery floss to make like the soft raspberries. And then the right blackberries are done with glass beads. And there's a fair bit of wire in there as well to have them actually stand out.
It's extraordinary. I mean, they look like we could pick them up and eat them. They just look so real. And then that leaf,
Yeah,
I'm trying to capture that with the camera. It's very complicated, but I hope we can see the relief and the 3D effect. So, and then moving on, we have another bumblebee here.
Another bumblebee, yes. So again, the same technique as I described with the bumblebee and roses. This one, the bee itself is dimensional, but the rose is stitched flat on its own, and then the bumblebee is appliqued to it.
Right. This incredible piece here is called Wildflower Fields, and to me it looks like an impressionist painting. It's extraordinary to see such fine details, and at the same time it's all blended. I mean, it just blows my mind. So tell me a little bit about it. I can't even think about how many kilometers of threads there is in this piece.
This was a farmer's field about a kilometer or so down from us that had been left go fallow. So there had been cattle grazing on it in previous years, and there was none this particular spring. And the colors of all the grasses and the Queen Anne's lace in the front and the clovers and the purple fescue and the various other things that were coming up was just fascinating. And I was really captivated by those colors and wanted to capture it.
So, but how do you create even a drawing of this to know where you're going to do this flower and that flower?
I do take reference photographs. Certainly when you're doing things like butterflies, the butterflies don't sit still long enough for you to sit there and draw them. So I have reference photographs. I take all of my own, and then working from those photographs I will do a drawing and then start stitching it up.
But when you stitch, it's freehand stitching.
Absolutely.
I mean, your eye is going to the image, but there is nothing on the fabric.
No, there would have, for this I would have had, a bit of green fabric at the top, maybe a strip of beige, the light green, and then the dark green. Those would have been the only elements that I would have had. As I say, that helps me lay out the composition so I get my proportions the way I want them. But all of the detail and the layering of the colors is done as I work through.
Now, we were talking about butterflies. Here's a beautiful specimen. Milkweed and Grasses is the name of this piece. We can really see here the shading on the grass. Tell us about that. How many colors do you have in each leaf, for example?
To be honest, I don't remember. There would the whole piece has over 50. I know that. This was one day doing I call it my butterfly walk that I do every day just to see what insects that I can spot around. And there was this beautiful monarch butterfly, and I just loved how the milkweed had been through a drought. It was kind of drying, it was yellowing, and there was the yellows and the oranges were picking up the colors from the butterfly. But all the grasses growing through it, and it was just nature at its messiest, but it was just so inviting and so delightful.
Well, Tracey, this is an absolutely amazing talent and collection. You're a little bit in the... Let me put you here so I can see you with some light on. So the exhibition is open at Robert's Gallery until when?
Until April 30th.
Until April 30th.
So there's 3 weeks to get here.
To get it, and we're very lucky that we're having the preview, and we're the first one to see all this beautiful work. What are you working on right now?
I'm taking a breather just for a moment.
You are. That sounds a little lazy here.
But I'll be back to my bees and butterflies very soon. And
Right.
the great thing is this time of year, there's new things coming in all the time. So I've got a couple sort of in the back of my mind that from some photographs that I took last summer, but I know there'll be new things this spring. So.
It's important to take a break every once in a while for the inspiration to come back, I think, to resource yourself, no?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Well, thank you so much. And really, it's a beautiful exhibition. Amazing work.
Thank you so much. It's been so nice to have you here, and I'm looking forward to meeting all the other members.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay.